Welcome back. This is Mrs. Reed Wright with Advanced Geometry. Today's lesson is 5-6, Inequalities in Two Triangles and Indirect Proofs. Alright, so you should have already copied the for your notebooks on page 337 and 339. Alright, so use the converse of the hinge theorem. Alright guys, so for the hinge theorem, let me actually quickly show you this. I normally use a door to explain this, but instead, I'm just going to use a textbook, and you can pretend it's a door. Alright, so here's a textbook. Pretend this is a door. So when I open up the door, or the textbook, this, the edge of the textbook is like a hinge, right? Like a door hinge. You guys have all heard of a door hinge, correct? Okay, so if I close it, this is a small angle in here. Therefore, this is a small opening over here. Let me zoom out a little so you guys can see what I'm doing. So, there we go. Oh, I should back up. Sorry. Okay. Zoom in a little. Alright, so if I open this up further, now this is a larger angle here. Therefore, this distance across here is greater. You guys get what I'm saying? So this distance is larger because this angle is larger. If I start closing this, this angle is smaller, this distance is smaller. If I close it more, smaller angle, smaller distance, right? So what the hinge theorem is this length right here and this length right here are staying the same, correct? So as long as these are the same, then this degree is going to determine the length of here. Does that make sense? So if you add one angle like this, with these two same side lengths versus another one like this, obviously this distance is greater than the other one because we're talking about the same two lengths. All right, is everyone clear on that? All right, so let's go back to here. All right. So, given that ST is congruent to PR, so these two are congruent, right? How does PST, so they're talking about this angle right here, compare to angle SPR? Okay, so do you guys see how this is reflexive, right? So we have 1 mark, 2 marks on this angle. This angle is 1 mark, 2 marks. So we're talking about the same length. So this one is opening up to 24, and this one's opening up to 23. So this is a smaller angle, and this is a larger angle. So I'm going to put B for big, S for small. Make sense? So what does that tell us? That tells us that PST is greater than SPR. Make sense? All right, so two groups of bikers leave the same camp heading in opposite directions. Each group goes 2 miles, then changes direction and goes 1.2 miles. Group A starts due east and then turns 45 degrees towards the north as shown. Group B starts due west and then turns 30 degrees towards the south. Which group is further from camp? Explain your reasoning. Okay, so two groups of bikers leave the same camp heading in opposite directions. So here we are. There's the camp. They're heading in opposite directions. Okay, each group goes 2 miles, then changes direction and goes 1.2 miles. Group A, so we'll say Group A is pink, right? And then we'll say Group B, we'll make purple. Okay, so it says Group A starts due east. So let's also give you guys your directions. Never eat soggy waffles. Never eat soggy waffles. North, east, south, west. Okay? So, it says Group A starts east. So they're going east. 2 miles east, right? And then turns 45 degrees towards the north. 45 degrees north. So from here, let's erase this and put it over here. Okay. That was 2. From here, they make a turn 45 degrees, so they would have been going like this, but they turn 45 degrees towards the north, right? Right? That's your 90 and your baseline. So they're turning 45 degrees towards the north, as shown. So they were showing this here. So they end up here. And they went how far? 1.2 miles? Okay. So now let's go back to our original. So here's our starting point, right? This is where they started. All right, so now let's go to our group B. Group B starts due west, and then turns 30 degrees towards the south. So instead of going on, they're going 30 degrees this way. Okay. So they're going 30 degrees towards the south, and they went 1.2 miles, right? Which group is further from camp? Explain your reasoning. So let's look at what's going on here. So they both have 2 and 1.2, right? So they both have the same hinge. So now let's look at their distances. This distance is across from this angle. This distance is across from this angle. What are these angles? This is a linear pair. 180 minus 30 is 150, right? So you have 150 degrees versus 180 minus 45. Anybody? 180 minus 45? 135. So is 135 or 150 going to open up bigger? 150 is bigger, 135 smaller. So who is further from camp? Group B. Group B. Explain your reasoning. Does that make sense? Because group B is 150 degrees, right, with the hinge theorem, and this one's 135 degrees, the same 2 legs. So because of the hinge theorem, we know that B, group B, is further away. Okay? So they actually showed this. So they have the 150 here and the 135 here, and they're showing that this one has to be a further distance than this one because of your hinge theorem. Because those were both equal, these are both equal. So you're just doing a hinge. Use the diagram at the right. If PR is equal to PS, and the measure of angle QPR is greater than the measure of angle QPS, which is longer, SQ or segment RQ? Okay, so let's look. So they said that PR is congruent to or is equal to PS, okay? And then they said that the measure of QPR is greater than QPS, so big, small, right? Which is longer? Well, the longer one is across from bigger, so RQ. Larger angle, larger side. If PR equals PS and RQ is less than SQ, RQ is small. The alligator eats what's bigger, big, right? The alligator he's going to eat what's bigger. That's kind of a messed up looking alligator. It's too small to draw on. All right, so here's your alligator. Alligator, your gator bait. All right, so the alligator eats what's bigger. So he's eating SQ. So this is big, this is small, okay? So it says which is larger? Across from the bigger side, angle SPQ. Write an indirect proof that an odd number is not divisible by 4. Write an indirect proof that an odd number is not divisible by 4. Okay, so they gave you, okay, so for your given, you're always going to, this is an indirect proof. So an indirect proof, you're going to always temporarily assume the opposite of the given. Okay, so if they say, if x is an odd number, you're going to temporarily assume that x is a number that is divisible by 4, right? So like whatever you're trying to prove, I'm saying this wrong, sorry. Whatever you're trying to prove, you're going to like do the opposite, right? And then you're going to prove it because that doesn't work. So temporarily assume instead of x is not divisible by 4, temporarily assume that x is divisible by 4. So you're going to do the opposite of what you're trying to prove. And then when that doesn't work, it proves what you were trying to prove to begin with. It'll make more sense once we do examples. So temporarily assume that x is divisible by 4. All right, so then this means that x divided by 4 equals a number, right, for some whole number n. So multiplying both sides by 4 gives you that x equals 4 times the whole number, right? So if x is odd, then by definition, x cannot be divided evenly by 2. However, x equals 4n, so x divided by 2 equals 4n divided by 2, which is 2 times a number n. We know that 2n is a whole number because n is a whole number, so x can be divided evenly by 2. This contradicts the given statement that x is odd. Therefore, the assumption that x is divisible by 4 must be false, which proves that x is not divisible by 4. This one's a little bit more confusing than the next problem. The next problem will help you actually understand this. Okay, so suppose you wanted to prove the statement, if x plus y is not equal to 14 and y equals 5, then x cannot equal 9. So your temporary assumption is going to be x equals 9. Right? Temporarily assume x equals 9. So then how would this assumption lead to a contradiction? So if we assume that x equals 9, then x plus y cannot equal 14, right? And y equals 5. Well, if y equals 5 and x equals 9, 9 plus 5 is 14. 14 does equal 14. So it says that like that can't be true, right? If x is 9, this doesn't work. Therefore, x cannot equal 9. Does that make sense? So we're going to say, like, x equals 9. Temporarily assume x equals 9. Well, if x equals 9, I'm plugging in a 9 for x. My y is 5. 9 plus 5 is 14. 14 cannot equal 14. 14 does not equal 14. It's false. Therefore, x cannot equal 9. 9 makes it false. Make sense? So you're proving it by proving that the opposite doesn't work. You guys see that? How it works? Okay. So, make an indirect proof of Theorem 5.14. So first off, what is Theorem 5.14? Can somebody please read it out loud? Yes.
Convert the image the two sides of one triangle congruent to two sides of another triangle, and the third side of the first is longer than the third side of the second, and the included angle of the first is larger than the included angle of the second.
All right, perfect. So he said that, wait, say that again, really loud.
If two sides of one triangle are congruent to two sides of another triangle, and the third side.
So if two sides of one triangle are congruent to two sides of another triangle.
Yeah. And the third side of the first is longer than the third side of the second.
If the third side of the first is longer than the third side of the second, then the first one's angle is larger than the second one's angle, is pretty much what he's saying. I know that it's hard to hear him across the room on the recorder, so I wanted to repeat that. All right, so write an indirect proof. So it says, given AB is congruent to segment DE, segment BC is congruent to segment EF. Segment AC is greater than, or the length of AC is greater than the length of DF. Okay. They are trying to prove that the measure of angle B is greater than the measure of angle E. So you can temporarily assume the opposites of this. So there's actually two different things that this could be, right? So if it's not greater than, it could either be less than or it could be equal to, right? So you're going to temporarily assume that it's either equal to or less than. All right, well, if it's equal to, if they're equal, if angle B is the same, so let's just call it X, as angle E, right? They're both the same. Well, then this segment would be equal to this segment. Let's see what they're saying. Is AC equal to DE? No, that contradicts the given. Therefore, they are not equal. All right, let's try with less than. If angle B is less than angle E, so bigger, smaller. Well, then DF would be greater than AC, and it's not. That contradicts the given. Therefore, angle B is not less than angle E, right? Which proves that angle B must be greater than angle E, because it's the only other possibility. Okay, do you guys see how that works? It proves it. It proves it by proving that the only other possibilities don't work. Does that make sense? So you're indirectly proving it. That is everything on today's lesson on 5.6, Inequalities in two triangles and indirect proofs. We hope you enjoyed the lesson. Please like and subscribe and have a wonderful day.